Taking LinkedIn seriously after 15 years. Matchmaking for developers and companies is hard, and a fast moving and competitive field does not make this any easier. But I do believe that good talent and good opportunity exists. So after 15 years of resistance to LinkedIn, I am starting to understand that it has the best potential for building partnerships directly. My name is Mark. I'm a contractor working mostly in Python. I do web apps, mid stack, full stack, any number of terms. And I'm here to talk about the many ways that there are out there to be social and try to chase down jobs. I think that the first one that's going to come to mind for anybody who's worked in this trade for more than a few years is the idea of recruiters. And generally, they are considered a necessary evil. I think that you can divide them into two groups. In-house recruiters, which I am not going to talk about, and the for contract recruiters, which are companies that recruit, let's say, a tech, and they have divisions for Java or front end or whatever it might be. Those guys are the ones that are more common because not every company can actually afford to have their own in-house recruiter. That comes, once you probably break about 100 people, that might be a possibility. So there are some pros to recruiters. I've worked with many of them. I even know a few that I like and respect, and I've also had a lot of bad experiences. But they do indeed consolidate a lot of effort. They do filter out applicants. If you have the right team, they can speed up the process. But the con is the commission-driven environment. They're very diverse in their effectiveness and how well they can actually place you in a job or find the right candidate for your position. So unless you have a working relationship or maybe a lot of budget or time or somebody who's willing to, strong arm an outsourced recruiting element, it can be difficult. And generally for me and companies, I've found, and I've been on both sides of the equation, a little bit more as the potential hire, but they get in the way of communication, and sometimes you kind of question their sincerity and are they forcing a matchmaking? They don't really want to go and really get that right fit. They're looking to plug a hole in a company, collect that commission, move on. And it works great sometimes, but a lot of the time I work really hard to filter out recruiters for the best experience for me. So they're not always the most effective, and companies and potential hires alike often cringe unless you have your guy and he really kicks butt. And I know a few of those. Another common avenue is matchmaking sites and startup orientated stuff. I think AngelList is the best example of this. And they're great. It's hot tech. It's sometimes a little bit of hype. It's often a lot of good noise. It keeps your finger on the pulse of the industry insofar as startups are concerned. But in reality, there are a lot of tire kickers. There's a really wide range of pay and dedication and seriousness in AngelList and others like that, where you don't know what you're getting involved with. You're pinging somebody. It takes them 4 or 5 days to respond. Is this a real company or somebody prospecting? Is this a recruiter pretending to be something else? You don't know. And after a while, you just end up running into all those, and the variation is just too broad, and it's just not very effective beyond startups and playing that scene, of which there is a scene, and AngelList is a really big part of it. But finding ongoing contracts, that can be a little more difficult. Now, I would never discount that avenue, and I keep my profile active, and I look in there, and I do talk to people and play that game, but I don't consider it my number one asset. I just consider it part of what is out there for us. So another common place for a fishing hole for finding employees or work is things like Stack Overflow and GitHub, which are fundamentally developer haunts. This is where people like me spend a lot of their day. I spend almost all my day on GitHub in one form or another, pull requests, reviewing, looking at other people's source code, evaluating packages for our own use. So I am on there all the time. Same thing with Stack Overflow. I often feel like I'm not hired for any of my ability, but my effectiveness in Google searching and cutting through all the BS answers on Stack Overflow. So, as a pro, we're there. The developers are there. And it is essentially a platform for communicating with your contemporaries, where developers talk to other developers. And there are tiers of developers that are in there. There may be some who are in a hiring position, but be it GitHub or Stack Overflow, both of them kind of fall into the same thing, where they serve another really big purpose, and they're very important in our workflow. They're also dev-centered, so they make very poor social networking sort of sites unless you're just dedicated to playing that game or you happen to be in a position where that is part of the game. But there's not enough bandwidth on those particular channels to really have good communication. And a great example is messages in GitHub. I follow so many projects and there's so many things going on in my world in GitHub that I never check my messages in GitHub. I scan my email. I have some filters to pull out, pull requests with my name on it and some other things, but I haven't looked at my GitHub messages, the little blue, I think it's a blue light in the top right-hand corner of your screen. I've never looked at that. Once in a while, I might open it up and immediately close it. So the same thing sort of happens with Stack Overflow. Now, granted, they give you a good email, and I've gotten some great opportunities off of both Stack Overflow and GitHub, but they're just not reliable enough. They don't have everything battened down for matchmaking and finding jobs like they do for their core functions, GitHub being a sort of social Git repository. So just because devs are there, it doesn't make it a good fishing hole for employers or for people like me looking for contracts. So I'm going to be there and I'll keep my profile active and I'll do the best I can. But, in the long run, that's not the place to be. Of course, there's social networks. Facebook and Twitter would probably be the best examples. And that's not where I really enjoy finding work. I know some people who really do a good job networking in Twitter, and certain fields are more conducive to Twitter and that type of networking, and there is potential in there, but there's a lot of noise, and it's still a social network. It still has a lot more of like an entertainment or news value than it does a career building value. And often that career value is an afterthought. If you're a reporter for the New York Times, you have your Twitter account because that's part of your career. But as a developer, Twitter doesn't make or break you in any way. It doesn't add or take away from your work. And Facebook and Twitter, they're too noisy for converting into a real contract and conversing with people. And there are really good communication tools on there, but often people are on social networks and they're playing other people. Granted, I have a few accounts floating out there that I play a person of type X, or I'm researching subject Y, and I get on there to learn about it. So the sincerity and the honesty of the social networks is a little unpredictable. So for recruiting, there's just too many problems. And, to use Facebook to hire employees might be a really good idea for a company like McDonald's or Good Times or something where the pay scale is a little lower and you're looking for somebody maybe in the teenage or young 20s just looking to get a job. That's a great way to attract some people, but you're not going to reach a 5, 10, or 15 year deep developer very well. It's going to be hard to target us, and Facebook is not the place that a lot of my contemporaries tend to hang out. They go in there, check on family and some other stuff, but that's not the place they're going. And there is one other one that's worth mentioning, things like Meetup. And I've run meetups, and meetup.com, of course, is what I'm talking about. And they do well. But often they're either completely informative or, where you're learning about something or watching a presentation, or they're just a whole collection of people such as yourself looking for jobs or employers looking for people. That's where a lot of poaching happens. And often that's the first wave of where a lot of my employers in the past have gone like, oh, we need to fill a new position. Why don't you just hit a couple meetups, see if you find anybody before we have to, pay money for ads or recruiters. So there's potential there, and there's definitely networking, and contemporaries, again, kind of dominate that scene. But it's not the place to go. So, here I am 15 years later. LinkedIn's about 18 years old now, 2002, I think it is, 16 years old. I'm finally acquiescing into the potential. And personally, I never really liked LinkedIn. I didn't like the experience. I'm still not an absolute fan of it. And part of me always had a problem with the pay for access. I know what the recruiter accounts have, and I know how you can, it's sort of a pay to stalk better platform. And my core ethical self just didn't really jive with that. But then again, I was a little hypocritical on the idea in the sense that I came to understand that social networks in general had an idea of if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And in the case of Facebook, I very much feel like a product where they're trying to track my moves and send me the best ad to do a conversion to cash that check from craft, because I just can't live without my craft singles, and they nailed me at the right time, and I went out and bought some or clicked through the ad or whatever that might be. So yeah, LinkedIn starts at about $30 a month to play a serious game. You can of course do it for free, and many have a lot of success. I think that as we're a little further into the maturation cycle of what these social networks are, and some of them are actually sticking, it makes sense. And LinkedIn fundamentally backfills a lot of professional needs for people in business. And that need is partially addressed by all of the other ones, the GitHubs, the Facebooks, and things of that nature. But I'm in the business of writing code, and businesses need code. And I can't really figure out any other way online to get in contact with people who are making decisions, looking for people, or want to have professional conversations and have that sort of dialogue isolated. So here it is, 15 years later. Sure, why not? Let's do some LinkedIn. And you know what? Seems like a really good choice. Well, let me know your thoughts. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.